Here's what you missed on the Mike Brown Morning Show.
You are tuned into the Urban Uplift. Oh my God. Always positive, always purposeful, always powerful.
Wake up.
Right here.
The Mike Brown Morning Show.
Wake up, baby, won't you wake up? Hit it in the morning.
Heard weekdays 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Right here on the Urban Uplift.
Good morning, good people. This is the day that the Lord has made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. I remember when I was in kindergarten, we would sing a song. Every morning we would gather around the piano. Did anybody else have a kindergarten teacher that played piano? Oh, maybe that's what made me interested. I don't know. But we would sing this song. Good morning, good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning, good morning to you. Our day is beginning. It's so much to do. Good morning, good morning, good morning to you. Anybody else know that song? Whether you know it or not, good morning. It's a beautiful day, man. It's not that cold outside, which is kind of different. But it's a beautiful day. It's got to be like in the 60s. I don't know for sure, but like if my field monitor, that's the thing. My field, FEEL monitor tells me that it's about 60-something degrees in the D. Now, yesterday it was cold in the D. Like yesterday morning, remember I said that? But anyways, I'm happy to be here. Today is Friday. It's the end of somebody's work week. I know you glad. And then those people that got those paychecks today, I know you're glad about that. Thank God. Make sure you pay your tithe and do what you're supposed to do responsibly. We're going to get into that a little bit later on when we talk about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Remember on Fridays, we review Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We're on chapter 5. We're going to see how much of it we get through on today. We got a lot to talk about today. As always, a lot's going on in our world. We still dealing with this whole Trump thing, and we got word that he lost, which is kind of like duh. But anyways, he knows that he lost, but in his words, he's just giving the Democrats a hard time. Basically, he just making it hard for them. But we're gonna talk more about that. That's real surface what I'm telling you right now, but we're gonna get into it a little bit later. He said he wants to get revenge. He's doing that to get revenge on the Democrats, but we'll talk about it. It's this article that BuzzFeed has about state travel restrictions. I want to share that with you. I know that we have people that listen in different parts of the country, and people that travel to different parts of the country. So that's going to be interesting to share. So we're going to share that also when we get back. I just need you to do me a favor. Go grab somebody and tell them to join you as you listen to the Mike Brown Morning Show right here on the Urban Uplift. I'll be back. It's Friday. Get excited. Go tell somebody. We'll be back.
Wake up.
Right here.
The Mike Brown Morning Show.
Wake up, baby, won't you wake up? Hit it in the morning.
Heard weekdays 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Right here on the Urban Uplift.
What's up, everybody? You've made a great decision today. I almost said the greatest decision today, but you've made a wonderful decision today by choosing to hang out here Thanksgiving. And a lot of us usually travel for Thanksgiving, or we meet in big gatherings for Thanksgiving. And listen, it's a tough call, man. Nobody can really answer how you should move, what you should do. Nobody can really answer. What we thought we were getting a grip of as it relates to the coronavirus, it seems as if it's more of the unknown like it was before. Like, remember back in March, it's starting to feel that way again, man. It's like But we can't live in fear now. We cannot live in fear, but we do have to live in wisdom. And so as believers, we have to show forth wisdom. So what do we do? I think that answer is different for everybody. You know? I don't think it's a generalized, well, everybody should still go home for Thanksgiving or everybody should still keep their plans. I don't know. But I found this to be quite interesting. This is a long one because we're going to go state by state. And I may take a break in between, but let's just go. All right, so here are the current travel restrictions in every state. As the holidays approach, people may be thinking about traveling home despite the surge in COVID-19 cases across the U.S. and the associated risks. The CDC strongly recommends you don't travel for Thanksgiving and avoid unnecessary trips in general. But if you do have to travel, it's important to take safety precautions. Social distance, wear a mask, wash your hands, and be aware of each state's restrictions. Keep in mind this list covers statewide restrictions on travel, but each state also has different policies for wearing masks and business operations. So be sure to read up on the latest mandates and follow the CDC guidelines wherever you go. Let me stop there for a moment. So it's so peculiar how our country is set up. It's like the states still have basically all of the power lies in the government of the state, because the state can decide to do whatever they want to do. And because think about it like this. Why is something like wearing masks not nationally mandated? The reason it's not is because the federal government cannot overstep. In a lot of instances, they can't overstep what it is the state governments have in place. And if you do, we will have to do a little more history. I mean, I would want to give you a little more informed information. Can I say those two words together? But I mean, in my mind right now, I know what I'm saying, but I don't want to spew it out without giving you a little more intelligentsia behind it. So, but what I will say is you can go and research this, but the states basically, you can almost say they have autonomy when it comes to most things. But then there is this umbrella that they still have to operate under called the federal government. But laws are made in each state. So a law here may be different in another state, which neither one of them are federally mandated. So, which is cool in some regards, but then it becomes stupid in this regard because now the president can't or won't mandate everybody in every state is going to wear a mask no matter what. So that's the catch-22 about how the government is set up. Now, while it's good that it keeps us from being in a dictatorship, but then now on the other hand, we see that it keeps us in a pandemic for way longer than we should have been. Right? So that's why it's up to us to take onus of the situation ourselves and see, man, this ain't good. We need to take self-inventory and we need to shut ourselves in. We don't need nobody to tell us to shut in. People keep dying, shut in. Okay. I'm continuing reading. We will continue to update this as restrictions change, but you should always check official state government websites before making plans. All right, I thought this was quite interesting because, like I said, people listen from all different parts of the country. Specifically, we're talking about our country right now. We even have listeners in different parts of the world, but I'm specifically talking about our country right now. And I think it's interesting because we all have family in different parts of the country. So you may be thinking about traveling to different parts of the country. So let's look at Alabama. In Alabama, there are no travel restrictions. Alaska. Anyone traveling in Alaska must present a negative COVID-19 test taken within 72 hours of departure or get tested upon arrival, but the latter will cost you $250 and you'll have to self-isolate until you get your results. Visitors must also fill out a travel declaration and self-isolation plan form when they arrive. Now, Alaska's not playing with y'all. Alabama said, come what may, whoever. That's a red state showing up. Alaska said, which is still red, Alaska said, if you come, we need a negative COVID-19 test and it says taken within 72 hours of departure. So I guess it needs to be at least 3 days old. That's what it sounds like. If you take the test when you get there to Alaska, you got to pay $250, and then you still have to self-isolate until you get the results. And they didn't say how long it takes to get the results. So word to the wise is Alaska may not be a good place to go. Okay. Arizona. There are no travel restrictions, but people arriving from Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport or Tucson International Airports will be required to wear masks. Okay, Arizona. Arkansas. There are no travel restrictions. California. The state asks returning residents and visitors to self-quarantine for 14 days from travel. So if you don't plan on being in California for a month, don't go. Because if you go, they're asking you to self-quarantine for 14 days. And they're just asking. So it's really no way to really control that. Because if you're not making a person fill out documentation or you're just asking them to do something, it's no way to get a handle on that. Colorado, there are no travel restrictions. Connecticut, it says travelers entering from most states must either self-quarantine for 14 days or provide a negative COVID-19 test within 72 hours of arrival. Visitors must also complete a travel health form. People who fail to complete the form or violate the self-quarantine may be subject to a $500 fine. Okay, now here's my problem. I understand how that can be controlled in an airport environment. But if I'm traveling and I'm driving and all I got to do to cross a state line, I'm literally just driving on the freeway. How then can you control that? I don't think you can. I don't know. I don't think you can. And then it says that if people don't quarantine, they're subject to a $500 fine. How would you know if somebody didn't quarantine? I don't know. Delaware, there are no travel restrictions. Florida, there are no travel restrictions. Georgia, there are no travel restrictions. Hawaii, as of October 15th, any traveler to Hawaii must provide a negative COVID-19 test from an hours prior. You need to plan on staying for a while if you're going to adhere to their travel restrictions. It says travelers must also fill out a health questionnaire and undergo a secondary screening upon arrival at the airport. Okay, now, so I see how they're able to control it, including a temperature check and potentially a second COVID-19 test paid for by the state. So that means they trying to stop it at the airport. And they got a better chance. Hawaii has the best chance of controlling the virus because it ain't like you just about to drive to Hawaii. Yeah. So if they doing that at the airport, they should have. I don't know. I gotta look at it, but they should have the lowest amount of cases in terms of a state. But Idaho, there are no travel restrictions. Illinois, This is a popular one if you live in the Midwest. There are no statewide restrictions, but Chicago requires visitors arriving from certain states to quarantine for 14 days. Again, okay, so I live in Detroit. If I decided to drive to Chicago, there are no checkpoints. There are no, I mean, you can take a turnpike, but even then, like, how can they determine? Okay, so I drive from Detroit to Chicago. I check into a hotel. Who's going to, what is the word I'm looking for? For lack of a better word, who's going to oversee the fact that I quarantined or not? Then there could be hundreds of other people just like me that said, I'm going to drive to Chicago, whether it's from Detroit, whether it's from Indianapolis, close places. How can they control that? Interesting. Are these just words that sound good, or do they really have a handle on that? Okay, Indiana, there are no travel restrictions. Iowa, no travel restrictions. Kansas, visitors who meet certain criteria, such as taking a cruise after March 15th, traveling from North or South Dakota, or attending an out-of-state gathering of more than 500 people must self-quarantine for 14 days. Again, when you say words like must quarantine for 14 days, first, how do you identify those people? If they don't identify themselves, how do you identify them? And then when you say must quarantine, how do you then guarantee that they quarantine for 14 days? Interesting. Kentucky, the state recommends a 14-day self-quarantine for travelers from or who recently visited states with a 15% or higher positive testing rating. See, that's too much. The state also discourages any non-essential travel at this point. Louisiana, no travel restrictions. Maine, although I don't think any of us were going to be going to Maine, but visitors from most states except Vermont and New Hampshire are required to self-quarantine for 14 days or provide a negative COVID-19 test within 72 hours prior to arrival into the state. A certificate of compliance stating you intend to quarantine. Okay. So they're making people kind of, they're kind of agreeing that they are going to self-quarantine. Or proof of your negative result must be shown to all lodgings. Okay, now that makes sense. Such as Airbnbs, hotels, and campgrounds. Now that makes sense, Maine. Now that's what the bigger cities should adopt. But they know that they adopt that, then they're going to lose out. But imagine if Chicago said, hey, when you get here to the hotel, we need to see your negative test results. That would make a difference. Maryland, returning residents and travelers are strongly urged to take a COVID-19 test 72 hours before or immediately after returning to the state. People who've recently visited a state with a positive rate of 10% or higher are asked to get tested and self-quarantine until results are obtained. Massachusetts, visitors and returning residents must complete a travel form. That's like when you go out the country. And this was prophesied. You know, Bishop Jordan said this too a few months ago. People who don't comply may receive fines of $500 a day. There are some exemptions, for travelers from lower risk states. Michigan. Now, I can't believe this. But how... Whitmer, what's going on? No travel restrictions. I can't believe we don't have no travel restrictions and we be shutting down all the time, which I'm not mad about the shutdown, but I think we need to add travel restrictions. Minnesota, no travel restrictions. Mississippi, no travel restrictions. Missouri, no travel restrictions. Montana, there are no travel restrictions, but travelers entering at airports or train depots should expect screenings by Montana National Guard. Now, that's good. That's good, Montana. It says restrictions may vary on Indian reservations. I don't know how to feel about that. Nebraska, no travel restrictions. Nevada, there are no travel restrictions, but the state recommends avoiding overly crowded, popular sites such as Lake Mead. I don't think nobody's, well, let me keep going. New Hampshire, visitors and residents returning from non-New England states should self-quarantine for 14 days. New Jersey, people arriving from states that are currently significantly impacted by COVID-19 are asked to self-quarantine for 14 days and fill out a voluntary online survey about their travels. New Mexico, people arriving from high-risk states are required to self-quarantine for 14 days or provide a negative COVID-19 test taken within 72 hours prior to travel. New York, travelers from non-contagious, I think that's supposed to say contagious. I don't know. Must self-quarantine. That's supposed to say contagious. Must self-quarantine for 14 days or provide a negative COVID-19 test within 3 days of departure. Prior to arrival in New York, upon arrival, they must still quarantine for 3 days and then undergo a second test. If the second test is also negative, visitors can end their quarantine. See, basically New York is saying, don't come. That's how you say don't come here. Okay, North Carolina, no travel restrictions. North Dakota, there are no travel restrictions for people traveling within the U.S. Ohio, although not a mandate, visitors arriving from states within 15% or higher positivity rate are encouraged to self-quarantine for 14 days. Oklahoma, there are no travel restrictions. Oregon, the state is asking returning residents and visitors to self-quarantine for 14 days. Pennsylvania, out-of-state travelers must provide a COVID-19 test, negative COVID-19 test taken within 72 hours to arrival or self-quarantine for 14 days. Failure to comply may lead to fines up to $300. Rhode Island, visitors from states with a 5% or higher positive rate must self-quarantine for 14 days. In other words, don't come here. South Carolina, no travel restrictions. South Dakota, there are no travel restrictions. However, routes that pass through tribal lands may be closed or restricted. Tennessee, no travel restrictions. No surprise there. Texas, no travel restrictions. No surprise. Utah, no travel restrictions. Vermont, returning residents and visitors from out of the state must quarantine for 14 days. People may be able to end their quarantine after 7 days if they do not show symptoms and receive a negative COVID-19 test. Virginia, no travel restrictions. No surprise there. Washington, the state asks visitors and returning residents to self-quarantine for 14 days. Washington, D.C., anyone intending to travel to Washington should take a COVID-19 test within 72 hours prior to departure and only travel if the result is negative. Visitors who are staying in D.C. for more than 3 days must also get tested within 3 to 5 days of arrival unless they meet certain exception criteria. West Virginia, no travel restrictions. You know, I've never been to West Virginia. A few of these states I've named I've never been to, but it seemed like West Virginia is just tucked over somewhere. But the scenery, every time I look at pictures and stuff, it looks so beautiful. But it's so small. As a state, it's really small. But it looks so big. The scenery. Okay, Wisconsin. There are no travel restrictions. but the state encourages postponing any non-essential travel. The last one, folks, Wyoming. There are no travel restrictions, but the state recommends following CDC guidelines on traveling safety. Okay, so we just went all 50 states and the District of Columbia, and here's my advice: don't go. Just stay at the crib. Use the advantage of technology to contact and be in contact with those loved ones that you will want to be in contact with. If you live in the same state, you don't have to travel the highways and byways and airways. Then, go and be with your people. Still social distance or whatever have you. Sanitize, wear your mask, all that stuff. It's up to us now, man. The benefit that we have now, compared to March, is that we know that we need to take care of ourselves in certain ways. In March, people were just dropping like flies before we can get a hold of at least what we should do. Now, although the virus is no less impactful or no less vicious, we at least know that we need to wear masks. In some situations, wear gloves. We need to take vitamins. We need to be hydrated. We know those things now. So let's do that. I'll be back. Don't forget that we're going to be reviewing Chapter 5, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Go grab somebody. Go grab your book. And when we come back, we're going to get into it. We might get into something else before we get into it. But we're going to get into it. All right, it's the Mike Brown Morning Show. I'll be back.
Wake up.
Right here.
The Mike Brown Morning Show.
Wake up, baby, when you wake up, hit it in the morning.
Heard weekdays 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time, right here on the Urban Uplift.
No shade. I like to call that his attempt at church. Everybody just ain't churchy, but that's as churchy as it's going to get with Todd Delaney. But I like the song. So remember I told you earlier that we live in a country that, although we're under the federal government, each state kind of makes their own rules, for lack of a better way of saying it. There are times where everybody has to abide by the same thing, by the same type state mandate. So this clip I'm getting ready to play, I vetted it a little bit, but I didn't vet it all the way. But we're trying to see the question that's being asked. One of the questions that's being asked of President-elect Joe Biden is, will he shut down the country? And since March, we have not seen our country be shut down. And that says a lot when you have that many people dying and the federal government doesn't step in and say, hey, wait a minute. So let's see what he has to say. Let's see if he gets to it. If he take too long, then we're going to have to cut him off because we got stuff to do. We got to talk about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. All right, I'll be back.
Deal with this pandemic, we got to plan for the next one. The idea that viruses are going to go away is just not rational. We're going to recalibrate and set up the institutional structures we had in our administration of Obama, Biden, and build on it. And what was your third question?
It was about the dollar, sir, whether you think a strong dollar will help or hurt with unemployment, or generally just how you'd like the Federal Reserve to sort of approach the...
Well, quite frankly, the way the Federal Reserve has been approaching dealing with the dollar has been in a positive direction. Our interest rates are as low as they have been in modern history. And I think that is a positive thing. It lends credence to the possibility of us being able to expend the money and deficit spend in order to be able to generate economic growth right off the bat. And so I think it's been positive so far.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President-elect.
Mary.
You have said that if this transition doesn't get going, especially coordination on vaccine distribution, that lives will be lost. How many lives do you think are at risk here if this transition remains stalled?
Well, look, you've heard the projections. The projections are that if nothing fundamentally changes between now and beginning of February, we're likely to lose up to total of 400,000 lives, another 150,000 lives. And so it's real. Whether it's that, it gets to 360, whatever it is, it's real. And there is no excuse not to share the data and let us begin to plan. Because on day one, it's going to take us time. If we don't have access to all this data, it's going to put us behind the 8 ball by a matter of a month or more. And that's lives. How many would be lost as a consequence of that? I can't tell you. But the purpose here is to we talked a lot about with the governors about what the immediate needs are. We're going to employ the Defense Reconstruction Act to be able to go out there and dictate companies build and do following things. We need much more testing. We need much more masking. We need gloves. I asked them each to go, and I asked the National Governors Association through the Governor Cuomo and the ones on the line to let us know what their shortages are, what they anticipate. Because we're going to move on day one. That should be moved on now. But if it waits, it takes a long time to get this thing going.
And when you take a step back and you look at the way the president is handling this, his refusal to concede, what do you think is really going on here? In your view, Mr. President-elect, what do you think the president is doing? What are Americans witnessing here?
Let me choose my words here. I think they're witnessing incredible irresponsibility, incredibly damaging messages being sent to the rest of the world about how democracy functions. And I think it is well, I don't know his motive, but I just think it's totally irresponsible.
Are you concerned he may succeed, that people may question the legitimacy of your administration?
No, I'm not concerned. The vast majority of the American people, all the polling data has indicated, although the Republicans who worry about it is higher, but over 78% of the American people believe it's, without question, it's legitimate. I just think it's, and I think most of the Republicans I've spoken to, including some of the governors, think this is debilitating. It sends a horrible message about who we are as a country.
Thank you, Mr. President-elect. Thank you, Vice President-elect Harris. Appreciate it. Nice to see you as well. Yes, appreciate it. You have said that lives could be lost if you don't start getting briefings from the Trump administration. And now here we are, more than 250,000 lives could be lost. Given that, how do you justify not taking legal action to get the briefings that you say are critical, that you say you need?
It would take a lot of time. It would take time. It's not going to speed it up considerably, in my view. And in the meantime, I am hopeful that I'm going to be able to get cooperation from our Republican colleagues in the Senate and the House, as well as the governors, to build a consensus as to how we proceed when we do.
But why not use every tool in your toolbox to get the information that you say you need to do your job and to do it effectively on day one?
I'm making a judgment based on many years of experience in how to get things done with the opposition.
Do you think you would win?
My judgment is that we'll get further along by actually working with our Republican colleagues now, and because the time in which we would win would not materially change necessarily. But it's still an open question. It's an open question. It could change.
So you haven't ruled it out? You haven't ruled out legal action against the Trump administration, against the GSA?
We haven't ruled it out.
Okay. And given the death toll now, more than 250,000 Americans who have now lost their lives, you have said that you would support a nationwide shutdown if scientists recommended it. You've spoken to scientists now.
Everybody asks that question every single time I stand here. It was a hypothetical question. The answer was I would follow the science. I am not going to shut down the economy, period. I'm going to shut down the virus. That's what I'm going to shut down.
So that's
I'll
ruled
say
out.
It again, no national shutdown. No national shutdown. Because every region, every area, every community can be different. And so there's no circumstance which I can see would require a total national shutdown. I think that would be counterproductive. But there are constraints in which the degree to which businesses can be open. For example, it's one thing to say that you can have in a state that is there, where their infection rate is not as high, you can have a gymnasium open. It's another thing to say it can only be open 4 hours a day with X number of people. The church I go to, my Catholic church, they don't allow more than 40% of the people to come into the church. Those are rational decisions. It's not shutting down everything. It's calibrating based on what the threat is.
Thank you, Mr. President-elect.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President-elect, and thank you, Mr. President-elect and Vice President-elect Harris. A question for you first, which is, what do you make of the fact that the president is having these calls with Michigan county officials amid his bid to overturn the election? He's going to be having also Michigan Republican legislators at the White House tomorrow. Is anything that he's doing making you rethink your strategy? I know you say that you don't want to have legal action right now. And what do you say to Americans, especially immigrant Americans who came to the United States looking for political stability and seeing all the things that the president is doing?
Hang on, I'm on my way. That's what I say to them, not a joke. And what the president's doing now is really it's going to be another incident where he will go down in history as being one of the most irresponsible presidents in American history. It's just out of the, not even within the norm at all. There's questions whether it's even legal. But it's going to be interesting to see who shows up in this call to meet with the leadership. And this is going to, we've won Michigan. It's going to be certified. We're going to end up making clear that they're making clear that we won.
All right.
And,
all right. So,
but it just,
there it is. You got a chance to hear what he said. Now, I don't agree with him. I don't agree with everything he said, but he's more sensible than that of Donald Trump. So the question is, will he shut it down? He said no. He would not shut it down. It's another story that I want to share with you all real quick before we get into the book. This is not a gossip show. This is not a break stories kind of show. But I want to share something with you all that's already been shared. So it's not like I'm in nobody's business. But I think this is some information that we as the body need to hear. It's just really snippets of something that Kalante Gavin posted as it relates to some struggles that he had, some abuse that happened to him as a child, and how he was the conflict he had with it as a minstrel. Take a listen to this, and I'll have a little commentary after I play it. Here it is.
But the documentary gets to take you before the cafeteria video. how it was growing up from 5 to 12, 13, 14, and you're going through life as a kid being molested, man, by a boy cousin in the family. Like, how do you maintain that? And the preachers say that the hand of God is on your life, but somebody else's hands are in your pants. And so it took a couple of years, man, for me to see that what had felt good from being 5 to 13. And then, you're making up that this is okay, that it's okay for same-sex attractions. It's okay to operate and still sing in church, and nobody knows nothing because you're gifted and talented and anointed. So they say the hand of God is on your life and God's going to use you. But what do you do when you're broken on the inside and you have not confronted some things? I am some things. The danger that the church did and they do to most of my generation is that they put weapons in our hand before our times. Before they give you a gun, you first got to know what it is and how to use it. So what we do is we put them behind the keyboard, we put them behind the drums, we put them behind the microphones, and we not ask or get to see, okay, how healthy they are, not just how gifted they are. I was broken, man. I was like singing in church. I was sinning in church. I was slipping in church because I didn't want to confront an abuse sexually that happened to me from 5 to 12. And so it was a hard thing. It was hard to confront. It was hard to go through life. It was hard, man, trying to sing to people, man, and you see their tears fall out of their face because they're feeling the anointing and the presence of some things, the presence of a God that you can't feel. So what do you do being 15 and you go viral and everybody feels your anointing and everybody feels the anointing that God gave you, and the anointing on your life works for everybody else except you. So I was gifted for everybody else, but I could not see, wait, what I'm in is like, this is not healthy. Like it looks good, but on the inside, man, I was broken. So yeah, always heard it. What was wrong? So the violated. What do you do? What do you do when you're confused yourself, when you're broken and perversion is so interwoven in your DNA? So the violated. What do you do? What do you do when?
So I thought I would share that. You never know what somebody's going through. You never know. But I appreciate the fact that he was honest about it and called it what it was. He said it was perversion. I'm going to leave that there. But I'm just saying, you never know what someone is going through. And when you realize it and you own it, I think that's big. And I think people like him should go back into the community that they come out of and express it to the people just how he expressed it to us. And here's my thing. If you can have it, God can heal it. So that's not to alienate anybody, man. Whatever your problem is, you first have to recognize that it's a problem, though. When you recognize it, whatever it is, man, God can heal it. As a matter of fact, that he specializes in those types of things. That would be deemed for some of us impossible. But that's what God does, man. He works in the impossible. Okay, so shout out to Galante for telling his truth. I hope he's healed and he's on his way to healing. In Jesus' name, and everybody else that's out there struggling with anything, in Jesus' name. All right. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, chapter 5. And for those that didn't, the last story, that was Galante Gavin. That's the guy. Y'all know that song, This Ain't No Ordinary Worship. This ain't no ordinary song. Basically, he was saying that he was molested as a child from the ages 5 to 12. And then a video of him singing in the lunchroom went viral at the age of 15. And so he began to minister all over the country. And he was still dealing with those same-sex feelings and how he was conflicted with that, and then ministering to people and people being delivered, but him being in bondage, and how that all worked out and how he's on the other side of it now. So that's what that was about. And he's got a documentary coming out about that. So that just to be clear about what I just played and all that. Okay. Chapter 5, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's simply titled, The Rich Invent Money. Now, it's a short statement, but that's loaded. How does one invent money? So let's just go through it a little bit. Okay. We're going to go. I just pulled out some things that I found interesting, some things that I think that are nuggets. And let me tell you about chapter 5, man. I think that Robert really gave us the game. As it relates to real estate, he dropped maybe not a lot of nuggets, but the nuggets that he dropped were so rich that if you read chapter 5 and go apply it today, it could work for you. Now, remember last chapter we talked about taxes, right? The title of the last chapter was The History of Taxes and the Power of Corporations. Well, once we understood why taxes exist, and then we understand why corporations exist and how we're able to benefit through corporations as it relates to taxes, then that just catapults us to this next chapter, The Rich Invent Money. I almost want to jump to that part, but let's go step by step. All right. Robert made note. He said, it's not the smart who get ahead, but it's the bold. He used an illustration about being in a classroom and a person that may very well know the answers and have the knowledge related to the subject matter, they will find themselves in the back seat, if I could use that analogy, or they will find themselves on the losing end because while they were knowledgeable, there was another person that was not as knowledgeable, but they were bold enough to say the wrong answer, or bold enough to admit that I don't have the answer, but I'm going to participate. And he tried to make the illustration of that's the type of grit, that's the type of attitude that you need to have when it comes to understanding money. And so he spends a little bit of time here in chapter 5 talking about financial IQ. And he talked about it a little bit in previous chapters, but he kind of hones in on it here. Why it's important for your financial IQ to be at a certain level, to have a certain understanding of finances. Here's something he said. If you develop your financial IQ, you will prosper greatly. If you don't, this period of time will be a frightening one. So when he wrote this book in the early to mid 90s, I think this book came out in 1994. Then he was saying, if you don't develop your financial IQ, this period will be a frightening period. But then on the other hand, if you do develop it, then you will prosper greatly. That still reigns true today. If I challenge you, everybody that's listening to me, that if you strengthen your financial IQ, I'm guaranteeing you that you will prosper. Now, there are some fundamental principles that you have to put in place. God set them up. You have to be a tither. I'm going to tell you that right now. You have to be a tither. And once you take care of that, and once you apply yourself to being a student and understanding how money works, it will work. I promise you. All right, let's get back to the book, though. So Robert created this game, and I challenge everybody to play this game. Me and Marsha used to play this game. It's called Cash Flow. I love that game. The game, it's one of those games, it's like you kind of get what you get, and you have to make the best of what you get. That's the best way I really can explain it if you haven't played it. But the whole idea of the game is it's a balancing act with between your income statement and your cash flow. And so the same thing that we've been talking about here in the book on how to make your assets become your cash flow. Because what happens when your assets become your cash flow, you're no longer exchanging time for money, meaning that you don't necessarily need a job anymore because your assets have created enough income. Your assets now become your income. Right now, your job, you go to work 40 hours a week. Your job is your income. So what does that mean? If I get sick, then my income probably drops. If I use all of my vacation days and I have to take time off, then that takes away from my income. If I lose my job, that takes away from my income. If I get furloughed, even if I happen to get unemployment, that still takes away from my income. But if I have assets, then my assets become my income. And while they are working, while my assets are working to make money, then I can go pop off and do other stuff. And I don't have to commit to an organization for income because my assets have replaced that. And your assets have really become income when your assets can not only become income, but also take care of your expenses and you still have money left. Let's look at it again. If your assets, and think about those diagrams, and remember the diagrams that were in the last chapter. If your assets now become your income, it flows up to income, then it pays for your expenses, and then you still have money left. Oh, you winning now. And it all came from you purchasing assets. Now, here is where, and I'm going to get back to it, y'all, but it all goes together. But here it is. This is where understanding taxes and having a corporation comes into play. The money that you make on your job is taxed. So by the time you get it, they've already taken taxes out. The money that you make in your corporation, you know that all of that money is pre-taxed dollars. Does that mean that you don't have to pay taxes? No. But what it does mean is that you pay taxes after you've spent whatever it is that you needed to spend. Okay? So these are pre-tax dollars in your corporation. Now, if you work a job, it's not going to work because they're going to take taxes out of your check. But the challenge is for you to figure out ways to create this income that can be pre-taxed. Now, what's the benefits of it being pre-taxed? Well, again, you can pay for everything you need before you even pay taxes. And when it's time for you to pay taxes, you have to remember that because this is a business, everything that I've done costed me money. What does that translate to? It translates to what we call write-offs. A more technical term would be deductions. So what that does is, if my business made $60,000, if I had to buy equipment, pay for office space, pay for gas, because a part of my business is traveling. I have to perform, so that means that I have to have clothes. They have to be cleaned. If if I'm an entertainer, I mean, when I get my hair cut, that's important. I have to be groomed when I'm in front of people, when I'm entertaining people, I'm providing a service to people. So now those expenses could very well equal $25,000. So now I'm taxed not the $60, I'm taxed at $35,000. You see how that works? You get to decide. That's just part of it. That's not even it. When we get into real estate, I'm gonna show you how it works when we get into real estate. Let me keep going. Okay. So in Robert's game Cash Flow, it challenges you to see what options you have when something is thrown at you. Right? So it shows you basically, like I said, about how to balance the assets against your income, and then it also encourages you to invest. And it shows you how you can make an investment real small, and when it comes back big, you'll get paid real big, but then it's up to you how you handle it when it comes back. Sound like real life, don't it? Okay. Remember in chapter 1, Mike's dad, Rich Dad, a part of him showing Robert and Mike how to make money, he played Monopoly. They played Monopoly all the time. Robert and Mike didn't understand why they were playing Monopoly. And that's another one of my favorite games too. I love playing Monopoly. But remember, Rich Dad kept telling them, this is all it is. 4 greenhouses, 1 hotel. Just do that over and over again. So this is what Robert found out about games. This is what he says. He says, games reflect behavior. They are instant feedback systems. Think about that. Games reflect behavior. They are instant feedback systems. So it basically shows you a game, and how you play it shows you who you are. It shows you your character. It shows you the decisions that you make. It shows you how far you will go. Think about the last time you played Monopoly. Think about the decisions you made. Were you willing to pay extra for a property to get a Monopoly? Were you willing to sell something in order to buy something else? It instantly shows you who you are. And then for those that have played Cash Flow, if you haven't, go to cashflow.com and you can play it for free, but it'll show you who you are. Although it may be a game, it's not too far from what you would do in real life. So he says that the single most powerful asset that we all have is our mind. That's the single most powerful asset that we have is our mind. Remember now, what is an asset? An asset is anything that puts money into your pocket. What is a liability? Anything that takes money out. All right, let me hurry along. So if the mind is well trained, it can create enormous wealth. If the mind is well trained, it can create enormous wealth. And then, so a lot of times, Robert highlighted that people always say that savers, you should save money. And he says, this is Robert's words. He says, savers are losers because the money that they're saving is being saved at such a small percentage that it could actually be more valuable in another place doing something else. But these are my own words here now, but here's the jacked up part. While you're saving money at the bank is doing with your money what you could really do with your own money And they probably paying you 1%, 2%, maybe annually or something like that, or however that works. But you know it ain't nothing when you look at your savings account and you see, oh, okay, 3 cents. And that's for the people like me that don't keep a lot of money in savings. But I mean, I would imagine people that got hundreds of thousands of dollars, I mean, maybe they might see a few $100, maybe a couple of thousand. But what could it be at a 10% ratio? And I'm trying to get there. I hope I don't run out of time. So he says that savers are losers. And here's why. I'm going to read well, let me read this. He said in the 1970s, we could save our way to retirement. Passbook savings accounts earned double-digit interest, and savings accounts could actually grow our wealth. Those days are long gone. He said we're in the days now of negative, and this was almost 30 years ago. So imagine what it is now. But he says we're in the days now of negative interest rates or interest rates below zero. Today, many banks are charging savers to hold their money, and savers are truly losing. So here's what I want to get to. This is what Robert is saying. Putting money away every month is a sound idea. I'm reading. It is one option, the option most people subscribe to. The problem is this. It blinds the person to what is really going on. It causes them to miss major opportunities for much more significant growth of their money. The world is passing them by. As I said, the economy was terrible at the time. And now you have to go back and read chapter 5 to understand what he's saying about at the time. For investors, this is the perfect market condition. A chunk of my money was in the stock market and in apartment housings. I was short of cash because people were giving properties away. I was buying. I was not saving. I was investing. Kim and I had more than $1 million in cash working in a market that was rising fast. It was the best opportunity to invest. The economy was terrible. I just could not pass up these small deals. Now, check this out, y'all. This is the nugget that he dropped, and it'll work for you today. Houses that were once $100,000 were now $75,000. But instead of shopping with local real estate agents, I began shopping at the bankruptcy attorney's office, nugget number 1, or the courthouse steps, meaning like tax sales and things of that nature. In these shopping places, a $70,000 house could sometimes be bought for $20,000 or less. For $2,000, which was loaned to me from a friend for 90 days for $200. So in other words, he borrowed $2,000 from a friend, 90-day term, and he said he would pay him $200. So he gave his friend $2,200 back, okay, after 90 days. He says, I gave an attorney a cashier's check as a down payment. While the acquisition was being processed, I ran an ad advertising a $75,000 house for only $60,000 and no money down. The phone rang hard and heavy. Prospective buyers were screened, and once the property was legally mine, all the prospective buyers were allowed to look at the house. It was a feeding frenzy. The house sold in a few minutes. I asked for a $2,500 processing fee, which they gladly handed over, and the escrow and title company took over from there. I returned the $2,000 to my friend with an additional $200. He was happy, the home buyer was happy, and the attorney was happy, and I was happy. I had sold a house for $60,000 that cost me $20,000. That's $40,000 that was created from money in my asset column in the form of a promissory note. Now, you have to go do your due diligence to understand what a promissory note is. But in short, basically, Robert sold a house to a person, but he essentially was the bank, meaning that he held their mortgage. So I sell you a house. You give me The house is $60,000. You're gonna give me he didn't call it a down payment. He called it a processing fee of $2,500. And then they paid him monthly until the $60,000 is paid off. All right, but let me keep reading here. He says that in form of a promissory note from the buyer, total working time 5 hours. So now that you are on your way to becoming more financially literate and skilled at reading numbers, I will show you why this example of money being invented. Why this is an example of money being invented. All right, look at it. If you look at the diagrams following this example, you see now in the assets column you have the $40,000, which is now called a note. It's a promissory note. These people have to pay, but it's a sitting asset. So, but the income is created by someone paying monthly. At the same token, the liabilities on this is $20,000 because remember, he had to buy it for $20,000. So he's paying a mortgage on $20,000, but he's receiving rental payments on $40,000. Okay, $40,000 is created in the asset column. So basically, money was then invented. And get this, it was invented without it being taxed. And now this is a little dirty, I suppose, but Robert charged them 10%. So they have to pay him $60,000 at a 10% rate. That's additional cash flow added to his income statement. All right. This is just where we're going to have to pick up next time. But he found a house. He went and got some tax attorneys, or he went to the courthouse or whatever it's called in your town, city county building, or wherever they sell houses for tax sales or tax liens or foreclosures or bankruptcies. He was able to buy for $20,000. He put $2,000 down. He turned around, sold the house for $60,000, but it was an easy sale because it was really worth $75,000. All right, that's a nugget. Chapter 5. We'll pick back up there when we come back next Friday. I want you to claim your day, tell your day how it's going to be. Claim your weekend, tell your weekend what and how it's going to be. Have a super fantastic, wonderful rest of your day and weekend. We'll holler back at you on Monday. Peace.
Wake up.
Right here. The Mike Brown Morning Show.
Wake up, baby, when you wake up, hit it in the morning.
Heard weekdays 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time, right here on the Urban Uplift.